see all of you here. Even though, just like Anna said, of course, there is this thing with the rows. And I would like to welcome my panelists to talk about my absolutely favorite topic, innovation in the Baltics. Please do. Today, with me here is Dr. Anna Hultin from Stigenberg from ET Manufacturing, Stephane Ouaki from European Innovation Council, and Egita Aizsilniece-Ibema from LIAA. And I will actually maybe start with giving you the opportunity to introduce your organizations, because I know that maybe a lot of people in the audience don't actually know what you do and what is the main mission. So maybe Egita, I will start with you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Egita Aizsilniece-Ibema. I'm working for LIAA, which is known in Latvia, I guess, these letters, but it's Latvian Investment Development Agency. And there is a new office in Brussels, LATTECH, that I'm heading, and it's first from few, there are more to come, technology representations, where my mission is to help Latvian businesses and Latvian ecosystem players to get better results from European programs, so to access to finance, to funding, getting grants and other type of funding from Horizon Europe program. That's my focus really. So I've been 1 year in this business, this particular topic. I met many of you, I see in virtual calls already, and I'm more eager to meet with more of you to see how I can help in finding the way around EU programs.
Great. So I understand your role is to be that bridge between Latvian startups and Europe. And Stephane Ouaki, European Innovation Council, that sounds very intimidating. Maybe you can tell a little bit more about what it actually is and what's the mission.
So the IC is, to summarize, a big bag of money, 10 billion euros that I have to spend until 2027. Most of that money will come in the form of grants, about 2/3, and about 1/3 of it, 3.5 billion, we're going to pour into equity in your companies, in your startups, the best startups in Europe that we are trying to select here. That's why I'm here today, to try to have a number of bilaterals with those startups. We are aiming not at all companies, we are aiming at those that are more in the deep tech area, with a very strong technological, scientific underpinning of what they're doing. And of course, why we're there, we're not there to replace the market, of course. I'm sure you're having lots of contact with different private investors. We are there to help bridge towards the market for those of you, because you're doing something that requires a bit more time to mature and attract private investors, and during that period of time you face difficulties to raise funds. That's where we come in. So we're here to help you bridge the gap, give you the necessary funding that you need at the beginning, and hopefully take your innovation to the level which you don't need us anymore and you can just fly away and make sure that you become a great success.
So we know now that the money is there. Now you just need to find a way how to get to that. And Dr. Anna, you're from ET Manufacturing. Maybe you can tell us a bit more on your focus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, EIT Manufacturing is a part of the EIT then, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. So we make things happen, you can say then. But we are then in the EIT Manufacturing focusing on the manufacturing industry. Our vision is to have the European manufacturing industry being sustainable, competitive, of course, then, and we then and innovative, then I should say also then. So we have programs and activities that boost innovation, entrepreneurship, and also competence and upskilling, reskilling, which is also needed in the industry then. So we are organized, we are a European organization organized with a headquarters in Paris. We have 5 different regional offices, one in Gothenburg then, where I came from, for the north region of Europe then, which is the Baltics, the Nordics, and UK then in our case then. And we have also then programs in education, innovation, and business creation, which I think is of great interest for the participants here then in TechChill, where we have different programs dedicated for scale-ups, startups, and we also put a lot of focus into connecting startups with corporates, as an example. And so yeah, that is what we do.
Thank you. Well, our topic today is about Baltics as the innovation capital. I know that there's quite a lot of competition in Europe and the wider region to compete on which one the region, states, and even cities will be the next innovation capitals or the next Silicon Valley. But I think now it's Baltics are in the running as well, of course. As we know, mostly thanks to the Estonians, we have quite a high unicorns per capita number. Latvia has been named one of the startup-friendliest countries due to very beneficial regulations, such as the stock options regulation. But of course, the competition is quite tough. And it's a competition for attention and investment and talent and funding as well. And Stephane, I will ask the first question maybe to you, since I'm assuming in your work, since you mentioned you have all of this money to give to startups, I'm assuming you see a lot of startups and companies in your daily work. And of course, great ideas come from anywhere, but do you see these strong trends maybe in specific regions that you can talk about, and which regions are the strongest, say, in specific areas? And maybe, of course, what we all want to hear is, have you seen Baltics and how Baltics do compete in this regard on these trends?
You're on top of the world.
Of course we are.
Yeah,
I mean, I have no doubt.
Of course. No, I mean, it's not the first time I came here. I see development in the Baltic region from a European perspective as being very promising, I mean, to tell you the truth. And not only about Latvia, but of course Estonia, which is quite well known for producing lots of unicorns. And of course also Lithuania is trying to find itself as a niche market. I think you have great potential here in the Baltic region because you have a very strong scientific research basis for which you can spring up a lot of those startups. And then you play also quite a key role geographically between different regions, further east, but also north and also further south, where you can be quite a kind of a crossroads where all these different trends and different, I would say, innovators could meet. What we observe, therefore, is that there is, I would say, more and more startups that are applying. I mean, some of them are succeeding. We run very, very competitive calls. So, I mean, obviously, for the size also of the Baltic countries, this is not so easy to get selected. But I think what's important is to try. What's important is not to be afraid to be competing against the big European countries, the companies coming from the big European countries, France, Germany, those that are more, I would say, dedicated, that have dedicated programs to help companies that are operating, for example, in the deep tech area, like in the Nordic countries, where this is much more, I would say, solid in terms of programs. And I think you stand quite a good chance if you're trying to break out on the European scene, and that's definitely my presence here, the presence of our colleagues, the very good connection we have with the programs that exist at national level is just testimony to the fact that we are taking the Baltic region as a very strong contender, and we see the potential growing in the years ahead.
Well, thank you. We always love to be flattered, and
I know that.
That's the straightest way to, the Baltic heart. But I will maybe follow up with you, Anna, since I heard deep tech mentioned quite a few times, and you also mentioned as well. So maybe the first question is, how would you evaluate the situation right now with deep tech startups in the region, both the Baltics and the Nordics? Because of course, when we see the startup audience, when we say a startup, to kind of most people, the first things that come to mind are Uber or Airbnb, more like consumer startups, where these deep tech technologies are actually sometimes even more important for us and on more long-term investments. So how would you say is the situation right now with the deep tech? Are we strong in this trend? And is it easy also to attract funding for these startups since they're maybe less publicized than the consumer ones?
It's a very good question, of course, but I think it's, it's quite a lot of attention to this now, and of course the special thing with deep tech is, as you say, it's also related to quite a lot of business to business, and also it's based on research and scientific, you can say, then results then. And of course that puts quite a lot of challenges into that and commercialize it and to understand the value. How do we really discover the value for the end user then, so to say in this case then. And also then it comes into play this with the collaboration between the academic and the startup. So it's quite a lot of challenges and a palette of different things you need to tackle in a good way then. And funding, of course, I mean, there are quite a lot of funding available, but for these companies it can be also more difficult than to get the funding, of course, than compared to business to consumer startups then, which is easier perhaps to understand in relation to the business than business idea then. So, but here I can tell that we at the EIT Manufacturing can play one important role then for startups in the manufacturing industry then, because we all have dedicated programs for business to business. We actually focus only on business to business startups based on this reason also then. And we are also connected to industry players which can understand and can also see that the solutions that are provided can actually match the needs from the corporate, as an example, to meet the challenges they have. So this is also a good opportunity to connect the startups with the corporates and create a win-win situation. So you can turn the challenges around and actually make them as opportunities then for the startups.
Yeah, so I will actually follow up on this question to both of you, since you represent these European organizations that also give the opportunity of funding. How would you see is this role, which are the situations where Europe should fund deep tech more, and at which point it should be more of a focus on VCs? Is it a question of stage, or is it a question of policy that you think maybe more scientific startups should be more should have more access to European funding? So what's how do you see the balance between private funding and this grant funding, and what would be the ideal format for that?
Well, I mean, there are certain sectors that don't really need the help of European programs or even national programs because they kind of fly on their own. I mean, consumer products, digital applications, I mean, all these are doing fine, and there's lots of money that came to Europe. Finally, we are catching up slowly but surely with the levels of funding that we see in the VC market in North America. So, I mean, the problem is really concentrated on certain sectors. In the deep tech sector, usually, as it was mentioned, it's business to business, but it's also more risky because you have usually, you need more patient capital, because before you can reach actually a return, you need to wait for longer. You are dealing also a lot with, I would say, manufacturing that takes time before you can actually produce and test your products. And that usually VCs in Europe, those that are present in Europe, don't like this so much. And for them to wait so long before they get a return on their investment is not something on which they can allocate a lot of money. So there is some money, some private money, of course, that is going towards this type of startup. But overall, we have difficulties to generate the same type of support, the same type of financial opportunities than the one that are operating in the US. And over the past few years, we saw a lot of American VCs also setting up shop in Europe to do exactly that, to take more risk, which is a welcome development, of course. So we here, in order to, like I said, to plug the holes, to like be where there is clearly a lack of funding in comparison to where our startups could actually benefit from this support. Otherwise, we run the risk that many of them will migrate to other places in the world. And not only the US, actually, where they will find better opportunities to finance. So this is why we concentrate in this particular segment of the market. But of course, we're doing it in conjunction with the existing VCs. I mean, again, here the idea is not to replace the market; it is to just give to the market, I would say, the necessary comfort with public money coming in order to decrease the risk level of the investment to such a point that then it becomes worth their money to come into those companies.
Thank you. Egita, you of course know Latvia the most, and you know how it works, and you know the startups here, and you probably met quite a few of them here. So how does Latvia support its startups on their journey to the global stage? And is there, since you're also seeing the kind of European level, do you see, how does this competition between maybe different countries play out in the context of competing for European funding? Do these Latvian or Baltic startups have it easy or have it hard, or are there some specific things we have to keep in mind?
Yes, so as a state organization that we are, we've been analyzing the way how to add value to the Latvian economy. And Horizon Europe is a very good source of funding for R&D activities. And then we see that in the previous program, actually, Latvia was not doing too bad, but the business part, the SMEs part, were not, that showed clearly that there is a big room of improvement. And after talking with the ecosystems, with the organizations, we understood that there is a lack of information, but also there was extra support needed in a way towards the calls and to get around it and actually to get motivation. Because it's also true that in Latvia at least, we see that there are lots of opportunities for startups. So you have to, as a startup, also understand the way where to put your efforts and where, because it's admin, of course, always, your hours, so where to put them. And therefore, I think what LIAA is doing is trying to help around this process in EU programs to save the time of the companies and to guide in the most possible calls and with the best chance to actually win. So in that process, so in comparison with other countries, there are great examples. Let me name the one coming from Latvia, which is Lightspace Technologies, a company who has successfully participated in EIC. And as you see now how they benefit from the network and the business support programs that EIC provide, they participate under European flag in the expos around the world, which is great for their growth, and also the expert hours that they are getting from the consultations, from the business activities from EIC. So there are lots of things to strive for, actually, as an added value, not only money, that Stephane mentioned. There are more examples in Estonia, Lithuania, where the companies succeeded in this call. But EIT program is very interesting. There are kicks, as you probably know. Yesterday we had EIT Awareness Day in Fantadroms, where EIT was explaining the differences. So you pick your topic, and there are calls that are maybe less funding, less money, but more of the mentoring and getting your technology to test beds, getting partners for testing, getting to market. EIT program is good for that. So depending what you need, then we can help with advising on the right programs.
Thank you. And I mean, we have talked about Europe and how Europe supports and different institutions support. And we know that in at least in words, all of the states and governments also support their startups. But one of the questions that we have asked quite a lot is, what is it that actually the states, and here I mean government and municipality, what should they maybe do more to support their startups? Because there are kind of two different approaches, either to kind of not get in the way and do nothing, just don't mess with them, or maybe they should more actively support, or at least more actively inform about European support. So this is kind of an open discussion, which is also relevant for us as the Baltics. What should, if the Baltics wanted to be or are the innovation capital, what should they do more, and what are the best practices in just looking at the government role? Anna, maybe.
Yeah, this is, I mean, you put a lot of good questions here on the table for us. But I mean, money is not everything, or let me put it the other way around. There are money available, so that is not really the main issue here. So it's more like how to make things happen out from money, to really make it things into action, so to say, and implemented. And here, from the government or from the regional level, so to say, if you focus into like stimulating collaboration, I mean collaboration, and especially if you can stimulate cross-sectional collaboration, then you have actors actually working together with different competences from university, RTOs, industry, together with the startups as an example, and also that in itself also can trigger then innovation, actually, because you have different ideas coming from different perspectives. And just to give one example, I mean, I come from Gothenburg. Gothenburg region is the most innovative in Sweden, and Sweden is highly ranked on the index of innovation. And there we have both national funding and regional funding put into the ecosystem and stimulating this collaborative way of working then. And that apparently has given quite a lot of good impact in that region if you look into the development during the last 10 years around Gothenburg.
Stephane, would you like to add something? Maybe you see the bigger picture. What would you like to see the governments do more or maybe less?
Well, I mean, at national level, governments set the stage in terms of regulation and so on. And of course, there are things that have proven to be more conducive to the growth of startups than other things. And I think, I mean, it's quite plain to see from, by just looking at what's going on in the world or in Europe. I think what we're trying to do at European level is add value to what the member states are doing or what is being done at the level of private or initiatives or regional initiatives in order to not to get in their way or to try to tell them what to do, because often they do it much better because they are closer to the action than what we can do at European level, but to try to empower and increase the impact of what actually they do. And it's by building these synergies between the different levels that you can then bring more impact in terms of support, and this is what we are trying to do. And I think this approach is definitely starting to get a bit more traction and provide a bit more results than what has been done in the past, where you have a lot of change per program and when things are not really thought through in terms of what is happening at national level. So I mean, joining forces is definitely a better idea than to try to say, okay, this one is doing well, this one is doing less well, and so on. Everybody is trying to do things, I would say, differently, depending on the context, differing the strengths, weaknesses that everyone has. And we are just trying to make sure that we can add value, add funding, and try to increase the impact of those initiatives and the support schemes that exist at national level.
So I'm going to ask you, Egita, a bit of a kind of ad opportunity question. What would be the main benefits, if you had to explain, of founding a startup in the Baltics? Is being small also a benefit, or do you see more of a drawbacks here?
It's definitely very advantageous to set up the business in Baltics. Why? Because it's not just, you're not just a startup, you are particularly being interested in certain ecosystem and certain cluster of talents, of innovation. Of course, with also as less admin as possible, of course. And there, I think Latvian startup law is in place where you can save on tax and invest in R&D. It's very interesting in the process of setting up startup and managing your finances there. But also it's really about finding a right ecosystem and then becoming part of it. And as you know, in Latvia we have 5 smart ecosystems that work very well, because the big industry players are sharing their infrastructure, is sharing their knowledge, and therefore you have access to actually work with big guys and test with them, and then also get them as first clients if you wish, and that really helps. So the industries, just to name them, is smart materials, photonics, biomedicine. It's amazing how university working together with the business community really create projects, and it's easy to communicate, rather than in bigger countries the access is more difficult, and you really have to be one of them to be trusted. Here it's the air is cleaner, let's say, the competition is less, so you can faster do this process. Then also ECT, 5G technology is fantastic. Many of you, I'm sure, is using test beds that are quite unique in Europe. I think it's not about really choosing geographic space, because I guess Baltics is not for the weather, but it's for the people, for the in your cluster, in your topic, right people to communicate and to develop things together.
Thank you. I mean, I could talk about this all day, but before, since we have the last 5 minutes left, I want to still raise one topic and maybe zoom out a little bit from the Baltics and talk about one of these kind of elephants in the room that are always there, where we talk about Europe's competitiveness on a global scale. And we know that, and specifically in terms of innovation and startups, we are a little bit running after Silicon Valley, and we know that Asia is investing huge sums in innovation and in deep tech specifically. So how would you evaluate what is our kind of current situation in terms of being competitive with these other huge regions investing huge sums, and what is maybe this Europe's potential and Europe's future?
Well, Europe's future is what all of us make it collectively, so it's for us to take up the challenge, and we are trying to help from where we are. I mean, the situation is correct. I mean, obviously, like I said, we are lagging behind in terms of private money going into startups in the US or same in Asia, in particular in China. I mean, we are aware of the challenge. Where Europe continues to be very, very strong is that the research capacity of European universities, of European corporates, companies, of innovators continues to be on a par with the best in the world, and we continue to attract a lot of attention from Americans or Chinese that are coming to Europe to get those innovations, to get those innovators to come and work there. And the reason for this is that, of course, we continue to produce world-class research. The problem in Europe is not so much that we don't produce those very innovative ideas that can potentially make the companies of tomorrow, is that often we lack the type of, I would say, risk appetite in order for us to grow the companies that eventually will make it to be global players. And often those global players are emerging out of the US mostly, or sometimes now out of China, more than out of Europe, and this is really a pity. I mean, so there has been a change now for the past, 10 years or so. We have seen like a growing number of unicorns emerging from the European ecosystem. This is something that we need to continue to accompany, so there is no fatality in saying, okay, we are lagging behind. I think that we are showing now with many European companies, including those in the Baltics, that we can rise to the challenge. But at the same time, we need to be, I would say, sure that we do it definitely with less money. We have less money available in Europe, but we put our efforts where it makes the most sense, when we can add more value in order to be able to make a difference. So, like I said, the future is there. It's not written yet. The return is there. It's happening. So we are helping, and everybody needs to pull together in order to try to make this to make a great deal of difference basically for our children, because that's what it means. I mean, do we really want Europe tomorrow to be just buying the products that are being designed and owned by companies that are somewhere else? And this is the risk, of course, for the future.
And maybe, Anna, I can give you the last word, since ET manufacturing, I'm assuming, but correct me if I'm wrong, then here Asia is a huge competitor, specifically in terms of manufacturing and investment in this area as well. So what does Europe need to do, in your opinion, to be competitive and stay ahead?
I mean, we need to believe in ourselves in a way then. that's for sure, first thing then. And I also hear, we put a lot of attention into this now, and also here, if I talk about Latvia again, yesterday at the EMT Awareness Day, I met with representatives from the ministries, and they really were engaged and really, I think, understood the question also. So I think from the governments we have in Europe, we have good support and good drive also then from their side then to support them. And I think, once again, to turn challenges into opportunities, to take the example from manufacturing, the problem we ran into during the COVID situation and with supply chains, breaking up, so to say then. And quite a lot of companies are now taking back, you can say, the manufacturing, putting up more manufacturing in Europe. Then And I think that is also will help us being more innovative, because then you can have a close connection to the production unit from your R&D and from the innovators and the startups to test the solutions, etc. So you will speed up things just by doing that. So I think that can be turned out to opportunities for us, actually. So.
Thank you. I will also then end on this amazing note. So I heard 2 amazing takeaways. First, we have to believe in ourselves. So I think that's quite a nice takeaway, and write our own future. And with that amazing line, I thank my amazing panelists, and I think we were all of the same opinion. It is the next innovation capital. Thank you, guys.